Hey, everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast is about getting to the books that have impacted my network. So these are great leads that I'll be interviewing on these books, and I want to know which books have contributed the most or a good amount to who they are, what they do, obviously their leadership. And the three types of books I'll be covering in the series are the ones where they're sharing with me, they're schooling me on books that I haven't read. The second category is one that we've both read, whether specifically for the series or if we've read it, separately in our past lives. And then finally, the third category is books that they've written or had a hand in publishing and getting out there. In this particular episode, my guest will be Karen Hinds. Karen Hinds is a founder and CEO of Workplace Success Group, a global training and strategic consulting firm that works with organizations to cultivate and retain their next generation of leaders. For the last 20 years, she has served as a trusted advisor to C-suite executives committed to building talented leaders and inclusive cultures where every employee can thrive and make an impact. She's the author of 5 books, including Get Along, Get Ahead, 101 Courtesies for the New Workplace, Networking for Better Position and More Profit, and A Young Adult's Guide to the Global Workplace. A prolific contributor to publications such as the Harvard Business Journal, the Toronto Manager CIM, the Boston Globe, Black Enterprise, to name a few. Karen is frequently quoted or invited as an expert on radio shows, television, and podcasts. Through her work with the Caribbean Development Bank and Dodds Training from the United Kingdom, Karen has facilitated leadership programs with government leaders from 19 Caribbean and South American nations. Karen regularly shares her experiences in her keynotes and workshops as she teaches on leadership, diversity, and inclusion, and adapting to change. For 15 years, Karen wrote a business column for an international newspaper and hosted a global women and girls leadership conference for several years on her island. Now, Karen, I've seen you again. You're another person that I met during the pandemic, so I haven't met in person. But obviously, we're both active on social media, so I've seen a lot of the work that you've done in the Hartford community and beyond. So it's very inspirational to see everything you share and your reputation in the community. And I'm glad that we can sit down for this conversation because social media is one thing, so I always want to get to know the person behind
Yeah.
who it is I see and what they share. So thank you for your time.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here. And hello to all of your listeners. Let's going. Let's get going.
So why don't we start with who you are today? What's your background? What kind of work do you do? I gave the
Mhm,
bio, but
mhm.
what is it you're doing day to day? What is it? I guess that fires you up day to day. What is that work? What does that work look like?
Sure. So day to day, and no day is typical now. Where I'm doing a combination of training for a number of clients across the world. With training on leadership development as well as DEI topics. I'm also doing a lot of either one-on-one or group consulting and coaching with C-suite leaders around how do they really build diversity, equity, and inclusion into their culture. So they're putting it into the DNA, the fabric of the organization. So a lot of my time now is spent doing that, and then coaching leaders individually to just how can they go to a whole new level of performance. So and of course keynote speeches, even though we're in a pandemic still, a number of organizations are still doing keynotes virtually. So a lot of my time is doing conferences and association meetings and internal company meetings around really how do you get people to be the best version of themselves and what I call provoke that genius in them.
I like that. So what is it that led you into that field? Like you don't have to
Mm.
go back. You don't have to go back to day one,
Way back to day one,
way
right?
back to day one. But whether it did start, I myself am a late bloomer in my career, but whether that push towards everything, all things leadership and development started with your family, examples in your family, whether it was education, experiences. How far back does that trace? Were the beginnings of the path that you're on now, where that started to lay out in front of you?
Well, I couldn't have said that if you saw me, let's say 20, 25, 30, maybe 30, 35 years ago, I wouldn't say I would be where I am. I knew that I enjoyed speaking and I enjoyed inspiring people, even at the young age. Even back, by the age of 8, 10, I knew I enjoyed public speaking. Don't ask me why 8 and a 10-year-old enjoys public speaking, but I did. But really, this solidified for me when I worked at Charlestown High School in Boston for working for the Boston Private Industry Council, training young inner city students on how to be competent and confident in a corporate environment. So these corporations were building their talent pipeline, and my job was to prepare the students. And I realized, wait a minute, there's a gap here that needed to be filled. So I went out on my own. So that's where that came. So starting with high school students and talent development pipelines for corporations. And like everything else, you start one place, but it morphs into something different, 25 years later.
So what's your family history? What's your background? You were born in the Caribbean. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, I grew up in the island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and went to school there until I was 15 years old. My parents, my mom and dad brought or my siblings and I to the US for educational reasons. Like a lot of families, you migrate so you can get a better future for your kids. And that's what brought us here. But I grew up in a village that was very family oriented, and it was a kind of place where when you got your report card for school, it didn't just go to your parents, it had to go to the neighbor and the aunt and the grandparents. And so if you didn't do well in school, the whole village knew that you,
Everybody knew it.
everybody knows, like, oh, geez, Louise. But it was that kind of environment that I grew up in, and they encouraged public speaking. And so that's where I got my foundation, where I feel comfortable in front of an audience, because really it's about how do you help people grow and be better. But I didn't know that at the time. I was just knowing I enjoyed the applause. I enjoyed, doing it perfectly in my speeches. And that's all I cared about as a kid.
So my family is from Colombia.
Mhm.
They came here much in the same way your parents came here for a better life, for a better education, for the American dream, kind of. Just kind of as a tangent here, just because it's an
Mhm.
interesting component to your story. How do you feel your immigrant story
Mhm.
ties into, builds, contributes to your work and leadership to the development of others?
I think it's critical. I grew up so very different. So when I grew up, I had a very diverse upbringing. First of all, I didn't know I was black growing up because we were in a predominantly an island that was black, and even people who were white on the island never really identified as white. It was more of a classist society. So I was shielded from racism in the way we knew it here in America until I was in my late teens, 18, 19, almost 20, when I started understanding what that really meant. But I also was brought up with diversity of music, literature. So I had a very um, strong development in the Caribbean because it was more of a global development, even though we were on an island. That has definitely influenced my ability to speak to different audiences, to speak to CEOs, to speak to senior leaders from different backgrounds, because I had that in my upbringing. I am not pigeonholed into one way of thinking. And people are always caught off guard because they see a black woman and they see someone talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and they have their own stereotype. Until I told them I grew up on rock music and country and western music, and they're often going, "What do you mean?" But I also enjoy reggae, and I also enjoy other types of music. So it's great conversation starters. I enjoy skiing, so I would say it messes with their stereotype of what I should be, and that has helped me tremendously as I'm able to walk in different circles, and I bring a different view of diversity, equity, and inclusion when I walk into rooms because of my own personal experience and being able to I've traveled worldwide, as I grew up as well.
Yeah, that's interesting that they have this preconceived
Yeah.
notion of who you're supposed to be, who you're not supposed to be, and
Hmm.
that you just come in and just blow that right up. Which,
Hmm.
I mean, just for my own thoughts, I think that's valuable
Mm.
because yeah, I think the race conversation. I mean, we'll leave that for a different day, but it's
Yeah.
when you come to it already with those expectations set in stone, you don't really get very far because you already come in with your ideas already shaped. So when
Hmm.
somebody comes in with something different that's unexpected, it shakes up the conversation a little.
Yeah, it for me it's a thrill to walk into rooms where people have one idea, and my job is to help open their minds to another way of thinking. Other people might see that as a difficulty, For me, that is an exciting challenge and actually an adrenaline rush to walk into rooms, especially where people. I had one CEO told me I walk into this room and I really wasn't interested in anything you had to say. Mind you, he paid me to come. So, and then at the end, he talked about you really opened my eyes to see things from a different lens, and that's why I do this work.
That's amazing. It's because often that's what it takes is just that one exposure to something that you don't commonly see,
Yeah.
someone you don't commonly understand or are familiar with. It's
Hmm.
you know, my last point on race conversations here is just it's unfortunate where I think so many people look at race at the high level, like what
Hmm.
they see in the newspaper, what they see on TV, without actually experiencing those
Hmm.
interactions that can make it real, make it different.
Hmm.
Um, like that perspective that you just shared about that CEO. I mean, he's probably never met anybody like you, whatever that may mean. And
Hmm.
up until then, he was probably reading about it, seeing it on TV, the different worlds that are out there, and then he meets somebody that is so different from him. It kind of opens his eyes. So
Yeah.
I love that you're bringing that to the work.
I think the last point I make is at the end of the day, my job is to, whether it's race or ethnicity, socioeconomic background, language, religion, whatever uh, facet of diversity we're talking about, it is about the human experience. That I don't go into my work coming from a race place. I come from,
Hmm.
let's talk about, we're all humans in
Yeah.
the storm of life. And what we need to get to the place of, we're all having a different experience. So let's learn the experience of the other person. And that's my approach when I do DEI work, to help people really take down the guard and defensiveness they often feel around this topic, and just to, let me show you my storm and you can show me your storm, but we're all in the storm of life. So let's figure out how we can make this a better experience for everyone.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you say that, Karen, because I think that's what's missing is that exact phrase. This
Mhm.
is where I'm coming from. Show me where you're coming from, and we'll
Mhm.
see like where we can meet. Often it's
Exactly.
like, this is my story.
Hmm.
Hard stop. That's all we're going to talk about. That's
Uh-huh.
my experience.
Exactly.
Uh, Karen, one more piece to your background. When you went to school, what was that like? What did you think you wanted to go into? And then obviously, what did you end up with by the time you left school?
I hadn't, but going into school, I thought I was going to be a number of things. There was a family joke that, all right, give her another week, she'll change again. So I wanted to be a doctor until I realized I couldn't stand at that time, doctor meant blood and gore. As a young kid, it didn't mean all the definitions of doctor now. But I realized I didn't like blood, so that was going to be a problem. I wanted to be a journalist, ambassador, a lawyer. I mean, the list kept going on. And where I am now, I would have never thought I would have been here. This was not in my mind, that somebody would actually pay you for your expertise. And as my family say, oh my goodness, they pay her to talk. I'm like, it's a lot more than talking. So I try telling that to parents and family members who just see you talking and getting in trouble as a kid for
Yeah.
talking, and now people reward you for it. So
Hey, you were back then. You were refining your skill. That's all.
yes, I was perfecting the craft.
All right. So why, based, with that foundation of who you are, where you come
Mhm.
from, your journey, and I'm sure something will come up because I'm always curious about little details and little
Mhm.
tangents and whatnot. Why don't you introduce the book that we're going to be discussing, the one that's kind of impacted you, whether it's a great amount or the most? Why don't you
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about what you selected?
Sure. So this book everybody knows about. It's probably the most widely read book, but I think also the most misunderstood book. And I'm going to speak from my personal experience. So the book I'm referring to, and before your listeners go, oh gosh, here we go again. The book I'm talking about is the Bible, and I grew up in church. I've read the Bible, but I'm reading it differently now as an adult, and I'll tell you why. I went into a business meeting looking for business at a very prestigious organization in Connecticut. And I got into conversation with the person who was in the meeting, and it was a man. And I was there with a young lady who was with me from my company, and we were talking about possibly getting contracts with this organization. And the man behind the desk just, looked at me, and he's talking, and he was asking strange questions. And I'm thinking, this is a weird business meeting. I just want a contract, or you tell me if I can get a contract, and let's move on here. And he started asking, so how are you? And I'm thinking, nobody asked you, how are you, in the sense that he was asking it in this particular business meeting. I don't know this person. And he was a referral. And we started getting into philosophical questions, and we started talking about, we did talk about the business opportunities, but we started talking to philosophical questions and life. And it was before the pandemic. This is about 2018. And for some reason, he asked, do you read the Bible? And I was so offended by this question, you would not believe. Because I'm thinking, look here, I did not come here to talk about my personal beliefs, religion, or God. Just tell me if I can get the contract and let's move on. Do you have opportunities or not? I read the Bible, leave me alone, let's move on. And he just kept asking about, our beliefs. And I just thought it was very weird. So I'm going to say weird for lack of a better word. But I didn't want to be rude, so I said yes. So he said, "Do you read it every day?" And I'm thinking, man, mostly. I mean, I read it when I felt like it, and I thought I had pretty strong faith. But he gave a challenge, and he said, "I want you to read it like a novel." And I'm thinking, this is a weird assignment. I'm not really interested in what this weird guy is saying, and I just need to leave because it doesn't look like we're getting any contracts. And basically, the challenge was to read the Bible cover to cover like a novel. And I thought, oh, what? And he said, read it like a novel, read it cover to cover. Don't stop, don't get stuck. Read it like you would any other book and just hear what it's saying to you. And I'm thinking, oh, great, this is how I'm going to start my day with this guy. And he said, the only thing is you have to read it every day. So set aside time. So that was 2018 that I started doing it in that format. And here we are in 2022, and I'm in my seventh reading of the Bible. Going through it, reading, I'm thinking, this was the first soap opera. It was the first reality series. It has all the makings of a drama and a suspense novel because I read it differently. And that's the book I chose.
So, and when you say you read it differently, I can imagine even from the first time you read it when he brought it up in 2018, I can
Mhm.
imagine each time you read it, you took different things away from it.
Yeah.
You saw things differently just based on your experience in those years. It's amazing how even just reading something 6 months from today, I can read
Mhm.
it today, see it one way, read it then, and I've had all these experiences that maybe craft my new
Mhm.
understanding of what that
Mhm.
is.
Yeah, definitely. It has changed every time I read it because I've changed. I've grown. What I enjoy about the challenge is number one, in order to do something every day, it requires a discipline and a commitment. So even though the challenge was reading the Bible, I began to see how it permeated all levels of my life. So the discipline of waking up every day, and for me, I read in the morning, every morning and reading. Now, granted, I must admit there are a couple of days where I barely got 3 lines in because I just wanted to not miss a day. And yes, I have missed, I think I missed like 2 days so far in the last couple of years of doing it. And there's some days I read a lot and some days I read just a little. Now I've gotten to a more disciplined approach where it's 10 pages every day for consistency and so I can meet a number of times per year. But it's changed me, and that's why I chose the book because I'm a lot more disciplined person now, and it permeates through my personal life, my professional life, my spiritual life, my life, every aspect of my life. That discipline is now a big part. So I changed the way I eat, I changed the way I exercise, I changed the way I dealt with people. It's affected my emotions where I'm not as reactive. I'm more methodical. I'm more focused. I'm very much more of a thinking person and recognizing that life is so complex and the things that used to get me into a reactive mode, it takes a lot longer for that because a different kind of peace that I'm experiencing. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean my life is perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying compared to where I was in 2018 to where I am now, it's a lot different. And I'm grateful for that.
So is it a combination of both the discipline of the reading as well as obviously the content that you're reading?
Oh, it's definitely both, of course. It's a discipline of content because the content changes you. You begin to recognize that you are not on this journey alone, number one.
Yeah.
That for me, that there is a divine power, that you begin to see how sometimes what you read in the morning and you're able to apply a strategy from the book at a business meeting and it works. When things like that start happening, it begins to blow your mind because you recognize that there are life lessons and how to live in this book that we've become so accustomed to and take for granted. So now it's a challenge and almost a game to say, okay, what did I learn today? How can I apply it in a meeting with a CEO? How can I learn to interact with other people differently? How can I approach a business problem from a different light? Even in my personal life, when should I speak and when should I be quiet? How do I deal with anger? So all of the things that we read in self-help books, for me, this is the ultimate self-help book. And it's begin to sharpen my ability to listen for my own instructions of what I should do. So my ears are a lot clearer to hear. For me, I say when God speaks to me, I'm able to move. I know when to take an opportunity. I know when to back off. Sometimes I have the urge to call someone. I do, and I begin to see things happen. But the frequency has increased as opposed to 2018. So it fine tunes your spirit for you to really operate from the power that you've been given and not be so distracted by what we've been told in the world.
Hmm. That's a lot to take away.
Trust me. When I got the assignment, I'm thinking, oh gosh, this guy and his woo woo stuff. But now that I'm living it, I find that somebody might think, no, she's the crazy one. But when you see evidence of it every day in your life, and I've asked other people, join me on this challenge, and they begin to see how they're changing, changed, and how they're showing up better and stronger in their life. What can I say?
Yeah. Um, so how would you describe the book itself? I'm not too familiar with it, but how would you describe the journey through the book overall?
So the book is divided into two sections, the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament is before the coming of Christ, the New Testament is we talk about Christ and his birth. For me, when I read the book, now granted, there are some books that are just simply boring because you talk about when it's not laying out the lineages of the different families and so give birth to so and their father and their mother. I'm thinking, oh, this is dry than bones, but you read it still. But what for anyone who might be new to the book, what I would suggest they do is start in the book of Psalms, start in the book of Proverbs. Those are a lot easier to read, and it offers some very tangible ways of how to live now. And as you begin to get familiar, then maybe you can go into the New Testament. So you have books starting with Matthew. So start with the book of John, so you can read and learn a bit more about the Bible, Jesus and his birth, and what does that mean. And then for those who are brave and who just want to read right through, start in Genesis. That's the first book. Revelation is the last book. Genesis talks about the beginning of the world and when God created the world. So it talks a lot about the 7 days he took to form the world. Again, I'm not talking religion. I'm not talking a denomination. I'm just talking read this book and read it on its own merit and see how it resonates with you. That's all.
Yeah, I think people may be hesitant to do that because of the religious aspect.
Mm,
Much in the
mhm,
same way that guy challenged you, just read it as if it's a novel, not
mhm.
looking at it overly religiously, but just that story.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I can only imagine like the lessons that you read about in the story, the different
Mhm.
stories within the book itself. Um, but are there some examples that you can give from your work and how you utilize those particular lessons that you took away, whether it's in meetings or with clients, with colleagues? Is there anything that stands out as an example?
Sure. There's so many. Gosh, which one do I choose? I think, for one, I was going into a meeting, and this particular CEO wanted, he had lots of different things he wanted to work on, and he was so intense about everything being urgency, and we needed to make sure we address all of it at the same time. And that morning, the lesson, the part of the Bible I was reading about was in the singleness of purpose, that we should approach life with a singleness of purpose. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, okay, singleness of purpose, what does that really mean? And as I went into the meeting later on that morning, that particular CEO kept emphasizing that he wanted to do all these different things, and I knew it was not going to work, but there was no convincing him. So I took a moment, and for me, I just said a quick prayer under my breath. I'm like, okay. It brought back to my memory the singleness of purpose and the power you have. And literally, I just started sharing with this CEO and acknowledging the need for him to address all of those areas, but showed him the power of, and I use the word singleness of purpose. And he looked at me like if a light bulb had gone off in his head. And I'm sitting there going, okay, this can't be this easy. So I was able to sway him in the direction that ultimately worked, because he had too many different places he wanted to go. And just starting with one. And as I said, he was bent on not doing that. But for me, it was an opportunity to show him why. And I only got that idea from the reading that morning. Other examples is when I should move, being able to hear and listen to move. So I moved from Connecticut to Florida in the middle of a pandemic. I knew no one. I had no family here. And might I say, I had no idea why I was here, but because by that time I was in the habit of listening and reflecting what is going on in my life. So as I was doing my reading and listening for ideas, the idea that came to my mind was I needed to move to Florida. And I did. It was a very quick move. It wasn't a planned move, but because I was listening and because I felt the prompting in my spirit in my devotion time in the morning, I was able to move from Connecticut to Florida. Literally packed everything I owned, sold the rest of it, put it in my Jeep, and moved down. And was able to purchase a property which was, I came on the market at the right time, that matched the picture that was on my vision board.
Wow.
And it blew my mind. And I bought it at the right time because the property was on the market, came off the market. And if I had not moved when I moved, I would not have gotten the property. And now I'm truly living my best life here. And that again comes from being able to be attuned to your spirit and knowing that you yourself, you're a powerful being, but you have to train yourself to listen and be attentive.
God, that's amazing.
And might I say, this is a property that has over 25 exotic fruit trees, tropical fruit trees, and vegetables, and that has always been my dream. So I have everything from coconut and mangoes and dragon fruit and sapodilla, and the picture on my vision board was to have a backyard garden with all the fruits I grew up with as a child. And here I
Wow.
am living that dream. So I know that would not have happened if I had not been disciplined and quieted and in tune to the journey that the reading this book has had in my life in the last couple of years.
So, for by any chance, did you ever go back or see that gentleman again, the one that brought up reading the book as a novel?
Oh, he's been my mentor since then. I never got a business deal, by the way.
Oh, really?
I never got a business contract from
Yeah,
him.
but think about it. You got something
But I got
better.
a better business. I got a better contract because he's been my mentor since then, and has helped me grow in as I go deeper and learn how to read the Bible from a different perspective, and then invite other people to join me. Again, it's not religion; it's about relationship, and ultimately, it's about helping us to develop that intuitive genius that we have in us, that we all have been taught to cover up. And that's what this reading has done for me. It's helped me to I call it provoke the genius that's been in me that I didn't know how to tap into. But because I was being quieted and disciplined and reading and paying attention, it began to unfold. My business exploded in the last, since started reading, my business has exploded. I've seen changes in my own family. I have seen changes in the people around me. So this is about helping you to become the absolute best version of yourself, the way you were created to be as a powerful individual.
Yeah. And I mean, it's amazing how I've seen the people that I've worked with. It's amazing that when they finally get around to feeling fulfilled or
Hmm.
happy
Hmm.
or um, bursting with energy,
Hmm.
a lot of the times it's because they've gone back to who they were. They've gone
Hmm.
back to who they were as a kid. In so many words, I guess, as we're growing up, we lose like that innocence. We lose that curiosity. It reminded me when you were talking before about when you were speaking as a child. You don't know, where that came from, but you loved speaking. Um, and it's great that you kept that because so much of what we are as children, right? That pureness, that innocence, that core of who we are. It
Hmm.
gets, like you said, it gets dimmed, it
Hmm.
fades, it's not engaged, it's not empowered, it's not fostered for the most part. The
Yeah.
luckiest of people do have it, but it's
Hmm.
amazing how much people, when they reach their happiest state, is because they've taken the lessons that they've gained throughout their
Hmm.
lives, but
Hmm.
they've gone back to who they were, what they wanted when they were younger.
Yeah.
It's just remarkable, like you said, provoking that genius. It's
Hmm.
amazing how much people don't realize is inside them already.
Yeah. And
They're
that's
they're,
what
they're
I'm.
looking for things on the outside.
But that's what we've been taught, and that's what ended up happening with the gentleman is we started meeting on a monthly basis, and sometimes we'd meet a couple times a month because as the reading intensified, I had so many questions. I would say, "Well, why did they do that? And why did God do this? And I can't believe this happened." And then I'm thinking, this is like a crazy soap opera. Like these people had issues and they had problems, and we glorify people in the Bible, but recognizing that they had more problems of you name it, you name every problem we had now, it already existed. So our relationship grew where now he's since retired, but we are still very much in contact on a weekly basis because now my learning has intensified. And what I'm recognizing is the world has taught us that we need to get quick fixes to everything. And when we don't get it, we get frustrated.
Oh
And
yeah,
if you want that genius in you to come out, it's going to take time to mold and shape and grow and change. And this is what this process has done for me to mold and shape and grow me so that I can be everything because and life is not 5 days old. It's gonna take time to evolve, and we have to get people back into you are powerful as you are. Stop allowing yourself to be dumbed down by other people and the messages in our community, and walk in the greatness in which you are created to be.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've just seen it so much in my work.
Mhm.
That's what it comes to, and people just they leave it on the table.
Mhm.
Um, they don't
Mhm.
step out. They don't step beyond what's given to them. They they
Exactly.
have they have their circumstances. They're surrounded by certain people. They're looking outward for that kind of reward, for that kind of filling feeling, that fulfillment, and they don't find it, and they kind of just shut down.
Exactly.
Instead of going inward to see what they're about, to express that and put that more out into the world. It's just so much is given up, but it's like
Mhm.
you have to craft the message in such a way that they realize that.
Yeah.
Because
There's
you may say something and then they're like, "Oh, that's just such a cliche." But it's like, no, you got to
yeah.
sit down and really think about it. Like you say, that instant gratification, we're addicted to that dopamine hit of
Mhm.
getting that fulfillment right away, and people don't want to put in the work.
Yeah. I was talking to a young woman who recently started the challenge maybe a month ago. And in our conversation this week, she said, "This is like learning a new skill." I'm thinking, yes, it is. Because now you're retraining your brain. And then she said, "This is hard." And I'm thinking, yes, it is. And I don't know anybody who wakes up every day and say, "I think I'll step out of my comfort zone on a daily basis. I'll be uncomfortable for the rest of my life." But that's what change is. However, for her, she was being faced with a possible downsizing in her job. And she said, since she started reading, her mind has been quieted and calmed enough to know that, 6 months ago, she would have been anxious about the thought of not having a job and not knowing where to go. But because she's given herself time to be disciplined, to read, to reflect, to think, she's now recognizing that the need for that anxiety is no more. That whatever happens, she'll be okay and she'll be prepared. So she was shocked by just in that month of her own growth and realization. And she's just at the very beginning. She has so much more to go. But the challenge to your listeners is to give yourself the gift of discipline, give yourself the gift of discomfort, and allow yourself to uncover the greatness that you have inside and shy away from the need to be instantly gratified by money, by friends, by fame, by all the things, knowing that when you dig deep, all of that will come, but it will come in a much better and stronger way. But first, you got to do the work.
Yeah. I think one thing that's come up a lot in conversations I've had is just how much
Mhm,
we overcomplicate everything.
mhm, mhm.
I go back to the example of just, this civilization that we're used to now. It's only been like this maybe a couple hundred years. In the
Yeah.
last 100 years, in the last 50 years, in the last 40 years, it's grown exponentially.
Mhm,
Now it's social media and all this other stuff. It's just kind of polluting the mind. There's just so much to pay attention to.
mhm,
Whereas millennia ago, it was just about, you know, we're talking primal here, but it was just survival,
mhm,
shelter, like the basic things that I need. But now it's just all this other stuff just kind of polluting the mind. Um, and we overcomplicate things. And I
mhm,
find that people find their success easiest when, as you said it before, I forget the exact words you used, but
mhm.
just simplifying it.
Yeah.
What was the wording, Karen, you used with the leader where you kind of had to get him to focus and it was just like
Oh yeah, singleness of
singular,
purpose. Yeah, singleness of
yeah,
purpose. Yeah, single focus. Yeah.
singleness of purpose. Um, there's just so many things that we have to focus on, or
Mhm,
we believe we have to focus on.
mhm,
Where if we kind of get all that shit out of the way, we can focus on who we are. I think the pandemic has been good for me in that sense, where it kind of forced you to no longer be able to go out to dinner regularly or go out to happy hour regularly or see your family and friends as regularly. It kind of forced you to, I have my wife and two kids, but it forced you to just be by yourself.
mhm,
And it was scary for a while because I
mhm,
wasn't used to that. Um, but it forces you to, okay, I don't have the access to the instant laughs, the instant camaraderie of my friends,
mhm,
or going out to dinner and having that fun at my at the at my fingertips.
mhm.
What is it what else is gonna, not that it's not important. I love my friends, I love my family, don't get me wrong, I
Mhm.
love a good drink, I love a
Yeah.
good happy hour, but it forced you to say, okay, if I'm stripped of all this stuff by the pandemic, this
Yeah.
ability to go out and find these things outside of myself, if I no longer have that, aside from my responsibilities at home and work, what else do I have? And you were forced kind of to spend a lot more time
Mm.
with yourself. It
Exactly.
was it was uncomfortable for a bit, but then once you kind of reach that bottom, it's been amazing since because I'm like, okay, what are the tools? What's the knowledge I want to gain? What is it that I
Mhm,
want to share? What is it I want to do more of? And
mhm,
I've poured myself more into my work because it got so stripped down to just who I was.
mhm. Yeah, definitely.
That
Think
simplicity.
exactly, and think about the people who we call influencers on social media.
Yeah.
What are they influencing us to do? They're influencing, not everyone, but there are a lot of people who are influenced to get rich quick, to be prettier quicker, to be thinner quicker. And the list goes on of all the things. And there are quite a few also who are saying, okay, let's take care of you. So, my challenge to your listeners is be the influence you need in your own life so you can begin to strip down to a bare minimum of what is it you need, not want, what is
Yes.
it you need to grow. And for a lot of us, it means facing past decisions, facing our emotions. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I had to face my own dirt. I had to face my own, feelings and just a lot happening during that time frame. So nobody wants to do that voluntarily, but in order for you to get to the other side of really living the best version of yourself, there's this gulf, this gully you have to go through. And that's where the work happens.
Yeah, I was talking to a colleague of mine. We were talking about just the importance of obstacles, the
Mm-hmm.
importance of discomfort. And it's one
Mm-hmm.
of those things where it sounds like a cliche. Yes, you need challenges in life, but um, cliches are such great lessons, but people are
Yeah.
like, no, that's cliche. I hear that all the time. I'm like, and it's kind of like you have to sit somebody down and be like, okay, those are the words, that's the cliche, but let's talk about what it really actually means. And
Mm-hmm.
she and I were talking about the power of obstacles, the
Yeah.
power of being tested, the power of being, taken out into deep water and not being in control.
Mm-hmm.
That it teaches you what you want to achieve, what's
Mm-hmm.
important to you, what your priorities are. We don't like discomfort, but it's a shame that people kind of give up when they first feel that first ounce of pressure
Yeah.
that they're not fully in control.
I was talking to someone the other day, and this is something, I think your listeners might benefit from. A lot of people, not only do they not want to feel that discomfort, but they're looking for the people who would rubber stamp their ideas, who would rubber stamp, oh, you're doing well, everything is going good. And they shy away from people who will challenge them
Mm,
and ask them questions and ask them to figure out, why are you going this way? Have you thought about it? Did you see the obstacle? So there are a lot of people who just want those around who can pacify their feelings and
yes.
make them feel good, and then they shy away from those people. I had a mentor who said, my job in your life is to be an irritant. And I'm thinking, what kind of mentor are you?
You're like, why do I keep finding these people?
Exactly. Why? And this is somebody else. I'm thinking, why do I find these crazy people? But he
Yeah,
was right. You
yeah,
need people in your life who are going to challenge your decisions, but love you anyway. And we feel sometimes that when somebody challenges you, that they're not invested in you. I prefer to have the ones who challenge me around and keep me on my toes than those people who say, oh, that's a good idea just because I said it. And not
yeah,
many people are mature enough to handle that because we want to feel good all the time. And I'm thinking, no, get uncomfortable and let's strip down
exactly.
and see what you have.
When I've spoken to students, and I love working with students because they're like this blank slate. They don't think they have any power. They don't think they have anything to contribute
Mhm.
because they're so young. It's like, oh my god.
Yeah.
But with them, I've told them when it's about finding your tribe, it's not finding people that agree with you all the time.
Yeah.
It's finding people that allow you to grow, that allow you to be curious, that allow you to pursue what you want to pursue.
Hmm.
But yeah, to go to a tribe that's just kind of like, oh, you're doing great, that's amazing. Like it's toxic positivity. It's like just saying the good stuff without really
Yeah.
challenging. And yeah,
Toxic positivity. I like that one. Toxic positivity. Yeah, I find too many people like that. And and I must say, I was one of those people. So I'm not going to be exempt from that because all my life growing up, I was told, you did a great job. You have great grades. You're so wonderful. You're a superstar. You're smart. You're this. And that gets to your head after a while. So when you meet the first set of people who start saying, well, why did you make that decision? Your feelings get hurt and your emotions get a little bit offended and you're thinking,
yeah,
who is this person? But there's a maturity. I'm now at the point in my life where I welcome those people because you don't want to be around a bunch of yes people because they will not challenge you to grow to the next level. And the day you find yourself knowing how to do your job so well that there's no room for mistakes is the day you've outgrown your job. Because if you're doing it to perfection, that means you're not really growing. You're just becoming a robot and doing things over and over and over again, as opposed to success comes from failure. Oh, let me try this a different way. Okay, let's try it. But when you don't have that trial and failure, you're not going very far. You're just a robot.
yeah. You're not refining yourself.
You're definitely not refining yourself at all. And people don't want to hear that because they want to stay in their comfort zones.
Garrett, what's out of the Bible? What's one of your favorite areas? Is there a story that I know it's a lot of pressure, but
Oh
is
my
there,
God, no pressure here whatsoever.
even if you have a list, what's towards the top of stories that I don't know, just hit you in whatever way it may be, but it leaves an impact on you?
So I think there are a bunch. So let me start with, I'm keeping your viewers, your listeners in mind and your viewers in mind.
Sure.
I would start with Psalm 91 because it is a chapter that talks about how do you get over when you're feeling frustrated, when you're looking for a safe place to land, when you want a place where you know that life is going to be okay even though it's difficult. So Psalm 91, talks about that God being your refuge. It talks about, a thousand may fall at your side, but none of it will fall next to you. It talks about just being reassured that you have a place and someone who you can rely on. The one that I grew up with as a child, and I have it memorized by heart because when you go to school in the Caribbean, they always made sure you memorize scripture. I mean, you're thinking, I'll never remember this, but believe it or not, as an adult, you do. So again, for the benefit of those who are listening, I would say goes well to Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Because I think we're in a pandemic now, and people are looking for reassurance. They're looking for an opportunity where they can know that they're not alone and life is difficult. And the last one I would share with them I would say, is Psalm 120. One, I will lift up my eyes onto the hill. So I chose all those in Psalm. But really, for those who want something a bit more media, read about King Solomon. Go into and read, that is an actual, when you go into the Bible, read Kings 1 and 2, read about there's his life, read about King David. Those are all areas that I think, as I look at how did these kings reign, what kind of obstacles they've encountered, how did they really navigate those. So first and second Kings in the Old Testament is what I would suggest for those who want a bit more meat and are looking for leadership lessons, especially in Kings. I really enjoy that. And for those who are looking for something a little bit different, a little bit new, I would encourage them to read Ephesians in the New Testament. So those are just some of my areas I would point them to, because the leadership lessons comes from First and Second Kings. The comfort comes from Psalms, and those are what I turn to when I have a difficult decision. I'm thinking, oh, what is going on here? So I'm just sharing my little tidbits.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Um, so I think you provided so much great information about the book, the scripture, how you've taken it into your work, how you've kind of shaped the lessons to the people that you were speaking with based on having read the Bible. And also when you're stuck in a moment and you said you kind of talk under your breath and you say a little prayer and kind of get going. So how would you craft it then, um, in relaying it to somebody else? In a
Mhm.
sentence or two, how would you craft the message of the general lessons that they can take from the Bible to their work, their life, their business, whatever it is? How would you summarize what somebody can take from the Bible if you had to put it in one little message, one little blurb?
A cheat sheet for life, a cheat sheet for living. That's the blurb I would use. This is a cheat sheet for living for life, because you begin to see yourself in the stories of the people you read and recognize that the obstacles you face are not that unique. They really aren't.
Yeah,
They're not. We might think they are, but when you look at the life of other people losing their children, losing their wives, their homes, dying from disease, molestation, rape, incest, you name it. That's 2022.
yeah.
People losing their businesses, their kingdoms. That is living now.
I think the worst part about when anybody feels challenged is that feeling that they're the only one going
Hmm.
through it.
Hmm.
And we know we're not the only ones going through whatever it may be, the heartbreak of losing a business, a loved one,
Mhm.
romantic part, whatever it may be. But the hardest part is always feeling like this is and has only happened to me.
Yeah.
Like
And
no
it's
one
a
else has
conspiracy
experienced
against you personally and only you.
it. Yeah. Somebody's
And
out to get me. Yeah, the
yeah,
universe
they're
doesn't
gonna
love
get
me. Yada
me.
yada yada.
They're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
get me. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
instead it's helping people to see that I think the disservice a lot of people have in life right now is we've been taught that life should be happy every day. Instead, life is a series of problems that we are forced to solve every day, and we're supposed to enjoy the in between and the throughout and still find joy. But because we're constantly seeking those moments of happiness, we think that our lives
absolutely.
are miserable. It's like this is all part of growing up. And it took me a while to get out of my bubble because I was living in a bubble for a while until I recognized, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like. Oh, I'm not sure I like this version.
Yeah. And that's come up in a lot of these book conversations
Mhm,
where somebody has found maybe the career that was meant for them, but they went
mhm,
through decades of
mhm,
hardship or
mhm.
obstacles, or um, they were in despair, whatever it may be,
Yeah,
the darkest of obstacles that you may encounter. But it all serves a purpose. It all gets you to where you are today.
yeah,
I'm only finding my rhythm in what I want to do with my life, and I'm 43 years old. And some people may say, I can see how much you're enjoying it. Don't you wish you would have had it? Don't you wish you would have had it locked down at 19 or 20,
no,
21, right out of college? I'm like, yeah, but I wouldn't have been the same person at that age.
exactly.
I went through the hardships, the heartbreak, the good, the bad, the losses, the wins, and each time you come out of any of that, it's like you're put into the fire, whether it's
Mhm,
a good experience that's going to make you harder, it's going to make you stronger. If it's a bad experience, the same kind of thing. But all of that serves a purpose. And the worst part again is when you're in those moments where things are tough, you're like, this is the way it's going to be for the rest of my life, like no one
yeah,
else is going through this. But um,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's interesting because a friend of mine that works at a local university asked me to speak to her students about real talk.
Mhm,
We bring in the executives to talk about their careers and how illustrious it is, and we talk about getting the job and this and that. But what we don't prepare students for is those kind of hiccups, those bumps, those obstacles.
mhm,
Um, and I told them, like, I believe I don't know the specific curriculums, but I think that's something that we need to share with our students. Is not just here's the knowledge that you need, here's the
mhm,
curriculum that you need, here's the degree you need, but we got to prepare them because I mean, think about not all mental health is tied to it, but how much mental health is tied to the lack of education on coping.
mhm. Yeah, it's mental health, it's life skills in general, it's finance, things like financing, making sure you understand your finances, relationships, understanding generational patterns, understanding how to move through change and challenges, how to rebound, how to deal with loss. I mean, I'm 51 years old and I had the first real loss through death in my life. I mean, other people in my families died, but 2 weeks ago, I had other mentors, but this is another mentor who was into the Bible as well. And she passed away. And I remember feeling very devastated. But at the same time, I remember her lessons to me that she kept reminding me that one day she's going to leave. And I'm thinking, yeah, we're not ready for that yet. You still have some things that you and I need to do, but she had already prepared me, and how much it hurt, but at the same time there was a joy knowing that she had given me a glimpse to what life would be like without her, and she'd given me a roadmap. Not many people have that, and for me, if I can help as many people recognize, all right, snap out of it. I know you're crying, I know you're hurting, but welcome to Living 101. They didn't teach you this in high school or college or grad school, but this is it, honey. Let's saddle up and let's go, and let's get you prepared and be okay with change. Learn to let go of people, of decisions, of things that don't longer work for you, and move on to the next phase, because after you do that phase, it's going to change again and again and again. And that, my dear, I'm finding that the need to change on a regular basis scares people. So,
Well, yeah, because I mean, social media is a good example of that, where you're just looking at the highlight reel of everything that's
Mm-hmm.
going good in somebody's life.
Yeah.
The goal in life is always to get the good grades, have the best life, follow the script of your life has to look a certain way, like
Yeah.
the marriage, the white picket fence, the dogs and the cars and the this and the that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'll stop now. I can talk about all
We
that
can be
stuff.
here all day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But Karen, in wrapping up, is there anything else you want to share or mention at all? You broke down the book beautifully, and you related it to your work. You related it to lessons, life, death, happiness, all of it. It's all incorporated in there. But in wrapping up, is there anything you want to share, whether about the book itself or the work that you're doing, anything at all?
So, if anybody listening, if you're bold enough and brave enough and you feel like you want to test this challenge, you know, reach out to me via my website, KarenHinds.com, and send me a quick email. Uh, and I would love to go with you on this journey, because I think sometimes when you hear things on a podcast, you're thinking, "Oh, I can't do that," and I'll say, "I would love to help you go on that journey." Again, this is not religion. This is not about any denomination. This is about relationship. And as I say, how do we provoke the genius in you for you to walk into and be the spiritual, mental, physical, emotional giant that you were born to be. So be bold, be brave, take the challenge with me. I'm in my seventh reading now. Come take start your first.
Have you? I'm assuming then that you have been that mentor to other people the same way that gentleman was to you and bringing it to you. Do you have
Yeah, yes.
somebody that you're leading through the journey right now?
Yes, there are people who I'm leading through that journey right now, and absolutely love it because I remember how resistant I was to it. But when I began to see the results in my life in all aspects, I thought this is not so bad. But trust me, there are days when it seems absolutely most difficult. And as I get on to one of the things I'm learning is as I get onto more corporate platforms and I speak with CEOs, I've had CEOs who ask me, "Can you pray with me?" And I thought, "Okay, then certainly." um, but I think people are hurting and they're looking for a way in which to connect with human beings. And when I work with corporations, when I do keynote speeches, when I do consulting, everything I do, I approach from I'm dealing with a human being who wants to be acknowledged.
Yeah,
Whether it's leadership, diversity, equity, inclusion, strategic planning, it doesn't matter. I'm working with a human being and they all have different needs. I'm going to meet them where they are, even if they say, "I have no interest in what you're talking about." That's okay. My job is to meet them where they are.
I love it. I
Thank
love the
you.
way you approach it. I love the way you broke it down. It's I might have to pick up a copy and just do a little reading, just because I want to round out what I have in my arsenal of books.
Mhm,
And that's just the book that I've heard. Obviously, same kind of you've put it in your own certain way, but the
mhm,
same kind of impact that it's had on people's lives. So, Karen,
mhm.
so thank you so much for sitting down with me
Thank
to
you.
talk about the Bible.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you to everyone who's listening. May your life be full with success and challenges that you've learned to overcome.
Absolutely. If there's anything that I might have missed in my limited time with Karen, please let me know. Email me. I'll reach out to her. I'll relay the message if there's something that I should have asked. Um, it always gets by me. There's certain things that I jump in and ask, but I wish I had more time. But I want to be mindful of Karen's time. So, Karen, thank you again, and thank you everybody
Thank
for
you.
watching and listening. Take care. Bye.
Take care.